The uncle's cabin sat crooked on a ridge, like a secret someone kept trying to straighten. Jonah stepped out and followed his boots to the porch. The prince stopped at the threshold, no prince inside. They ended as if someone had stepped into thin air. Why would tracks stop at the steps? His cousin met him at the door, eyes flat. "Dog won't go near it," he said. The animal sat on the ridge and stared at the cabin, refusing to cross. The generator hummed when Jonah arrived. 30 minutes later, the lights died. He ran out. The generator was silent. The pull cord hung loose, though it had been warm. How do you switch a generator off alone? Inside, the logbook had pages torn out clean. The kettle on the stove was full and steaming. The dog whined outside. The house smelled of boiled water and old wool. Practical explanations came first: forgetfulness, mechanical failure, wind. But the ridge tilted and the trees listened. The question lodged: who left so quickly, and why was everything set for someone who never returned? Jonah found boot prints in the mudroom, circling to the steps and stopping there. Tiny gouges marked the top riser like frantic fingernails. The uncle, small, stooped, admitted neighbors fled early. They said something told them to go, he said. We found their prints stop at the steps. He spoke like a man reciting a rule he'd learned, not a story he wanted to tell. Jonah checked dates. The missing pages matched the departures. The kettle's level matched the last tea time. Nothing else was broken. Nothing else was missing. Only the shape of the people who had left. He tried to be rational. The dog would let strangers in. A tampered generator would leave prints. None crossed the threshold line. Their choices narrowed into two awful possibilities. They left willingly, or they were erased from narrative. That night, he left a camera pointed at the steps and tried to sleep. At 2 a.m., the sound of tearing woke him. The logbook lay open. The missing pages were not there. The kettle vanished. Outside, the same boot prints appeared, ending like a sentence that refused to finish. He left his own prints beside them, and they matched step for step until the porch, where the pattern stopped. At dawn, they found a child's rain boot down the trail, half frozen, alone. No footprints circled it. News spread slow and low. Folks muttered about the hill having moods, but it felt like a warning rather than weather. He recorded the porch again. At 3:27, the phone battery died, though it had been full. The clip showed a shadow on the steps, a smear approaching the threshold, then static. The audio held a scraping and a low sound like an animal throat. At 0:23, 5 seconds were garbled, gone. 5 seconds can decide a life. The pattern tightened. Missing pages always aligned with silent generators. Animals refused thresholds before departures. Kettles were always full. The house behaved like a ledger itself, keeping records and closing accounts. Jonah tried resistance. He burned a ledger page in the stove and spoke the missing names aloud. He tied a flashlight to a tree and left markers along the trail. He left a watch on the porch and a photograph under the floorboard. Each morning he mapped footprints that reached the threshold and stopped.
He set bait, a chair, a scarf, a mug on the stoop. The kettle steamed on the porch, patient as a question. One dusk, a shape came to the steps. It was not fully human, an outline like someone taking off their skin. It leaned toward the threshold, and the bulbs inside blinked. The dog howled once. Jonah stood on the road and watched, whole body locked. The shape drew back, and the kettle remained. The generator hummed back to life. The uncle later found a new note under a floorboard in his handwriting. We were chosen, we chose. The gap keeps the mountain honest. The sentence explained nothing, but it showed a terrible acceptance. Jonah realized the consequence. Resistance risked erasure. The mountain's choice was cruelly simple. Refuse, and you might be unrecorded, a missing stanza. Offer something, and you stayed named. People who left in a hurry returned to town, but felt like souvenirs, their edges softened. Some found names blurred in family albums, others remembered in ways that made them flinch. He left with the ledger wrapped in plastic. On the highway, he met faces pale as half-formed ghosts. He asked no questions. At a truck stop, he tore a page and scribbled his name, then wedged that folded slip into the car's dash like an anchor. He did not know whether ink could hold him. He only knew consequence now. The mountain asked for stories and sometimes took them back. The answer to the first terrible question, the prince stopping at the steps, was not a thief in the dark. It was an old logic the place lived by. It catalogued absence and offered a bargain. Give a page, leave a kettle, offer a name, and you kept the shape of yourself. Resist, and you might be removed from history in the smallest, most final way. Jonah drove until the trees thinned. He kept his hand on the folded ledger and felt the roughness of the paper under his palm, a stubborn thing to press against erasure. Behind him, the ridge stood quiet, as if it had settled back into its old posture. He thought of the dog on the ridge refusing to cross, the kettle steaming on the stoop like a patient mouth waiting for someone to answer. He thought of people who left and were found empty of something essential. The ledger stayed under his jacket like a promise and a warning. He pulled off the torn page and wrote again, slow and deliberate, his name and a small note, "I was here." He folded it into the dash and started the engine. The road took him past the point the cabin faded into pines. He did not look back. The prince that stopped at the steps became a question he would carry. Whether a place can demand to remember you, and if so, what you're willing to leave behind to be kept. Days after, Jonah heard rumors, an aunt whose records vanished, a couple who returned blank when asked about their child. The town spoke in low tones. The uncle, over cold coffee, admitted more. My father kept lists. We learned to leave a pot or a page if someone had to go. It binds the name to the place. I don't like choosing, he added. Jonah dreamed of names walking into maps and being flattened. He woke to find a photo in his wallet, blurred at the edge, a corner rubbed away. Panic tightened. If the place unmade your presence in small ways, albums and notes would fray. He tried bargaining. He burned a ledger page and spoke the missing names aloud. He left a watch on the porch and a childhood photo under the floorboard. He tied a flashlight to a tree and set bright markers along the trail. The kettle steamed on the stoop each morning like a patient demand. One dusk, a shape came to the steps. It was not fully human, an outline like someone taking off their skin. It leaned toward the threshold, and the bulbs inside blinked. The dog howled once. Jonah stood on the road and watched, whole body locked. The shape drew back, and the kettle remained. The generator hummed back to life. The uncle later found a new note under a floorboard in his handwriting. "We were chosen, we chose. The gap keeps the mountain honest." The sentence explained nothing, but it showed a terrible acceptance. Jonah realized the consequence. Resistance risked erasure. The mountain's choice was cruelly simple. Refuse, and you might be unrecorded, a missing stanza. Offer something, and
You stay named. Jonah learned to be specific about what he left and why. He kept the ledger in a librarian's care and told himself to forget. But sometimes at night he felt the ridge lean in memory, and he would rub his thumb over the folded note in his wallet. The mountain had demanded a trade. He had given a page and kept a shape. That knowledge sat in him like cold wood, useful and dangerous.